Thank you everyone for joining today's Epoch Employee Experience webinar series, where we feature an expert every few weeks. Today, I'm super excited that Tet will be joining us from PagerDuty. We'll be talking about all things global new hire experience, onboarding, and overall employee programming. Before we dive in, welcome again. We're Epoch. I'm Jade. I'm one of the co-founders of Epoch, and why we're hosting these webinar series is because we know the employee experience space is evolving rapidly right now, especially with ever since COVID, hybrid work, return to office. There's a lot of mixed feelings in terms of how we approach employee programs and how to think about the space moving forward. So you can always tune into these webinar series and join us to learn from experts like Tet. We also host in-person programs and events now for more conversations just like this. So if you ever have any questions about that, reach out to me. Happy to share more info. But with that, super excited to be introducing Tet today. Tet is one of the most incredibly empathetic, forward-thinking leaders within the space that I have worked with. Tet and I have been in conversation the past few weeks, just really understanding how she views the entire space from the moment an employee joins a company to the moment they leave a company. And Tet joins us from 15 plus experience across leading companies like Asana and PagerDuty. So with that said, for today's conversation, before we dive in and I'll have Tet take it away and introduce herself, it'd be great to just warm up the chat and get how everyone is feeling today through an emoji. If you want to drop it in, that'd be great because during the conversation, we'd love to hear from you throughout. So with that said, today what you'll be hearing from Tet is how to create more engaging onboarding programs, because as we know, onboarding is the first impression employees get of your company. Super crucial to nail it, and Tet has definitely done that. Onboarding amidst return to office or hybrid work or global remote work, and much, much more, as Tet is incredibly passionate about diversity, inclusion, and programs that are really taking into account women as well. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and have Tet introduce herself. So Tet, welcome to our webinar series. Super excited to have you. Could you share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jade. So yeah, you've already basically talked about my professional journey, so I don't have to talk through that. But I initially thought I'd become a journalist and become an editor of some amazing magazine and live in New York, but life had other plans for me. But right now, I'm currently leading our efforts for PagerDuty's global new hire experiences and onboarding. And this past year, I've worked really hard to break down silos between our IT, RTA, and people operations, people development, and other stakeholders to really improve and uplevel our employee experience and meet our new hires where they're at. I also co-lead our women at ERG, and it's called Sister Duty. And on a personal note, I'm raising 4 girls. I have a senior in high school, so she's going to be headed off to college in the fall. I have a 3-year-old, 85-pound puppy. And I'm currently going through my advanced degree in clinical psychology and primarily focused on women of color in the workplace. So really around psychological well-being as it pertains to that demographic. So lots going on.
Tet, you truly do it all. I didn't realize your 4 kids were all girls as well, so love that. But let's dive in. I guess, Tet, could you talk a little bit about why onboarding is important to you? Why did you get into this space?
Yeah, so when I think about, I think one of the things with, and it's not just onboarding, but really the employee experience. Employee experience is closely tied with customer experience. And so when our employees are empowered to solve problems and find information and make their own decisions or be part of that decision making, they can focus on providing even more value to their customers and then strengthening those relationships, right? So I'm really all about that. And I also want to build experiences for people and build community. So somebody asked me a while back, like, what is your superpower? And I think one of the ones that I have brought, that I said was the power of building community and building connection. So I'm all about making sure people are engaged and build a community for that support and so that we can all move forward together. So with onboarding, the reason why onboarding is really attractive to me is because it's their first purview into what your company is, your company culture. It's the first experience into what it would mean for them to join, your team or your company. And so making that an excellent experience for them is that's something that I really would like, value. Because I know what good, I've been in onboarding where it's like, here's your computer, your email should be on there. Let us know if you have any questions. And then you find your desk and you move on. And then to the other side of it, where you're really given that roadmap and you're given the support that you need to be able to, so that you're successful, not just in your first week or your first 30 days or whatever, but in, they set you up for success, the company.
That's awesome, Ted. And just to give everyone a common understanding in terms of how onboarding works at PagerDuty, just curious in terms of like, where does onboarding fit under the organization, and what does PagerDuty look like as well right now in terms of like global footprint, size? Like, what are you working with?
Yeah. So the onboarding or the new hire experiences sit with the people development team. We're currently over 1,200 employees, and we have offices in San Francisco, Atlanta, Toronto. So that's our North America offices, and we have offices in Chile. We have a presence in London and Lisbon, and then we're also located in Sydney and Japan. So really big global footprint.
Okay, then maybe let's dive into that a little bit first, and then we'll get more into the employee engagement areas of your expertise, Tet. Just understanding in terms of like global onboarding, global new hire experience. I know that's something you think deeply about. So, what are some considerations you have right now in terms of global new hire experience, or even with like return to office?
Oh yeah, that's like the question. So I'll just start with the global experience. So when we think about onboarding, one of the things that we're trying to do is making sure that we have a global mindset. And so I'm actually working on a project where we're doing localized welcome videos. So we have a welcome video, but they're speaking in their native tongue, right? And they'll have subtitles. So people are saying welcome, but they're not having to be pressured to use one language, which is usually the English language. So we're pulling in a lot of that in terms of globalizing it. We're also globalizing and localizing our content. So for those of us who are in, for example, places in Japan and our offices located in Chile and in Portugal, we're making sure that we're the language is there, so it's either delivered in Portuguese if it's majority of our employees are Portuguese, and in Japan it's delivered in that way, sometimes with a translator. And then we also in Chile we've started to deliver some of the content in Spanish as well. So just really being mindful about that. And then we also have cultural playbooks. So with our different offices, we're working on these cultural guidelines or guidebooks, so people understand like how to work with certain offices. So for example, in South America, I think maybe in Brazil, the thumbs up sign is kind of a crude sign for them. It's similar to when we would flick somebody off for speeding past us in the freeway. That's not a good thing. So those kinds of little nuances, I think, are helpful, right? If you have a global business. So we're building that out and looking at a way to do that more. And then in terms of just onboarding, right now we're still onboarding everyone. Majority of our new hires are still being onboarded remotely. And we're leveraging our hubs and our resources there. Because right now the word is efficiency, right? All companies and organizations are all about efficiency. But we're also looking at what it would look like if we were to bring people back in. Not necessarily for day one, but but for like a typical, like our onboarding, so we have what we call the Dutonian experience. And with the Dutonian experience, it's a 2-day, 3.5 hour session, which we talk about our company and then our product and things like that. And so what would that look like if we brought it back into an office setting? So really looking at various ways. And then to your question around RTO is spicy right now, I think,
Yes,
still.
hot topic.
um, you know, and I'll just say that as my own personal opinion, and
Yeah.
it's really around what the leaders want and what the leaders are looking for, right? And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there are still some leaders who really want their employees to be back in the office for various reasons. Um, and I think I saw some research that new early career employees are actually wanting to go back into the office. One, it's also good for them, right? It's good for them. It's good exposure for them. That's where they learn. I know that if I were just graduated, from college and it's my first or second job, I would probably be okay with going into the office. But once you move down the demographic curve, um, folks who are maybe more senior in their careers, not so much into the office. And also you think about folks who, from an inclusion and diversity perspective, you think about caregivers, right? You think about the people who are caring for loved ones, and you think about folks who have accessibility concerns, or maybe they feel better at home. But also, I think I read somewhere that there's a number of people of color who would prefer to stay maybe remotely, because of the microaggressions and all of that. They don't necessarily see it or feel it now as amplified as they would be if they were in an office setting. So I know that was a lot.
And I admire you just tackling all the questions at once, Tet. I was like, oh, I threw a lot at Tet at once, but you addressed it all, I think, with incredible insight and just understanding how PagerDuty is approaching from RTO to like global new hire experiences to even your purview and your research on how this can be approached. And I guess like with that, Ted, just wrap up kind of how new hire experience and on a global scale looks like at PagerDuty. Are there any other like tips or insights that you would share with folks listening as they have to revamp how they think about new hire experiences right now?
Yeah, there's a lot there. But one of the things that
Yeah.
we're doing at PagerDuty is we're leveraging like kind of our professional development and goals for some of our employees. So one of
Love
the
that.
things that we're doing is, we've put it out there, like if anybody wants to have a facilitation practice or public speaking, they can come and they could co-facilitate or facilitate our Dutonian experience. And
Oh, so
so
it's like
we're
open call for all employees.
yeah. So we've got, for example, I have an engineer, a software engineer who does a session on imposter syndrome, and
Oh,
that's part of
sweet.
his professional goal, is to spread that into, to really do more of that. And then we have somebody in TA who is interested in public speaking and really would love to get more into this space. And so she's going to be helping me facilitate the Dutonian experience in the next month. So we've gotten folks like that, right? People who might be in other parts of the business who, are interested in contributing or doing this kind of work. So that's one of the ways that we've done it. That's been pretty effective.
Awesome.
Oh yeah,
That I should clarify for
yeah,
everyone.
that's right. Sorry.
Dutonian is what PagerDuty calls their employee base. No, all
That's
good.
right.
I was like, I should have asked you that up front because I know you all have a special one. Those are great tips. And I guess like with that kind of moving forward and getting your expertise and thoughts on employee engagement as a whole, I know you think deeply about this space. So I guess like for you, Tat, has there been any interesting shift within employee experience at PagerDuty or in your own observations?
Yeah, so at PagerDuty, we're really working on redesigning our employee experience to be digital, but not just digital only, right? So as I mentioned, we're honing in on the way we're supporting and accommodating employees across the globe, because we have a pretty big contingency of remote employees as well. So we're looking at fully remote, hybrid, and in person. And so what I'm finding is that flexibility is really critical to the success of any business. And flexibility is also becoming the norm. So companies are looking for ways to be able to, move more efficiently with the resources they have. So efficiency is, again, a big part that I'm seeing. At PagerDuty, though, one of there are two things that we are focused on, and that is to bring in connection and then the wow factor to our employees. So when we say the wow factor, we say, we want our employees to basically, after onboarding or any type of programming we do, to say, wow, that was amazing. So that's kind of our key metric, is if people do think that. And then also, one thing that I do want to share is that McKinsey did come out with a research that says 87% of American workers would prefer to work remotely at least once a week. So if they were given that option. And then Zapier also did a study and found that 61% would quit their current job for a remote opportunity. So there's all of those factors, right? And then we're looking at hybrid work. Hybrid work is growing, and not just in the US, but also in regions like EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and then in Asia Pacific as well. So that's been kind of the trends, and there's a big focus on well-being. I don't know if that's something that you've seen, but well-being is definitely one of those things that folks are focusing on. But also, there's also the upskilling and really focusing on what corporate would call soft skills. I'm actually not a big fan of that word soft skills, but more like human skills. So what does that look like? What does that mean? And I think I actually did a post on LinkedIn this week on that, on human skills and why it's important for organizations to hone in on it.
I love that. And I think like with those observations, it's clear from what we were talking about earlier, how you consider like the global context and why some employees do prefer being at home, like how you intertwine all of that to your programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And some of the programs that we've done that's really been pretty cool at PagerDuty, for example, is we have pop-ups. And that's being led by our workplace experience team. So the pop-ups are, we do them in our hubs, but we also do them in locations where we have a lot of folks who work remotely. So I think we just did one in Portland. And then there are some pop-ups coming up in Texas, in Denver, and some other places in the region. And it's usually a day's worth of just meeting other Dutonians or other employees. But then we also put a volunteering aspect to it. So whenever we do our pop-ups, there is always kind of a volunteer type of thing that we do, because social impact is definitely a big thing for us at PD.
That's awesome. And curious as well, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, for these programs where, like, for example, from like the professional development opportunity of like contributing to new hire experiences, these pop-ups, like how does PagerDuty let employees know about this, or how do employees often find out about these programs, like get involved?
Yeah, so there are several ways. So there's on our Slack channel on the people team, we have a marketplace. We call it this marketplace, where if you need help with something, you just put it on there and see if there are people who might be interested in working with you. You give them the number of hours that they're going to give to it, what the dates, and kind of some information, and then people will raise their hand and say, "Oh, I'm interested in that." And then in other times, it would be at a town hall where they would say, "Hey, if you're interested in any opportunities or whatever," this is how I found the person who was interested in doing the facilitation with me. she had said, "Oh, I would love to, public speaking." And I pinged her right away, and I said, "Do you want to do the digital?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah." So there's that, and then some people just reached out to me and said, "Hey, I would really love to do a session on imposter syndrome." Um, and I said, "Okay, let's test it out." And then we did, and it's one of the highest rated sections that we have on our segment, because we talk about imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome as a new hire, and as a new hire in tech, and as an employee who works remotely. So we kind of cover all the things, and then as a so we have kind of that slant to it. Anyway, so yeah, so we have that, and then we also just I think PagerDuty has built a culture where you can just reach out to anyone, and say, "Hey, I'd be interested in working with you on this," or, "Hey, I'm really." So that's what's happened with some of my programs. There have been folks who said, "Hey, I really would love to be part of Project F1." So that's the big cross-functional project that I led, and I'm like, "Yeah, how would you want to contribute? And let's talk to your manager to see where how you can help." So
That's awesome. I think like, yeah, that's what we're seeing across the board too. When they're more like grassroots, like you see other
mhm.
employees getting involved and leading it, the more eager other employees want to get involved. Um, and I know this kind of ties nicely, but I guess maybe kind of more adjacent to, I know you mentioned as well, part of new hire experiences, to kind of start building the culture of like understanding PagerDuty, but also understanding PagerDuty as an
Yes,
offering is super neat. Would you
yes.
share with the group what
Oh,
you incorporated there?
yes. Yeah. So, for those of you who may not know, PagerDuty is, well, in essence, we are the folks. If Netflix were down, let's just say, I hope not. The idea is that if there is a problem with Netflix, we would be kind of behind the scenes ensuring that Netflix goes back up, right? We are the alerting system that make sure all the right people are notified and that they are working on that issue so that you don't miss your show. So that's the way I would say what PagerDuty is in a nutshell. Um, so with PagerDuty, what I'm now working on, and we will be implementing here soon, is we're utilizing PagerDuty, and I developed or a team. There's a team of us. We worked through an automation so that all new hires will use our PagerDuty platform from their day one, and they'll get all of their tasks and everything they need to do on their PagerDuty platform, on the PagerDuty app or their PagerDuty desktop, which is amazing. So a big part of that is it encourages our teams to drink our own champagne, right? So we're using our own product. But also the automation is really cool, and super proud of that. But also then it just then enables our and builds behavior, instills that behavior for our new hires, that this PagerDuty is this really cool tool that we're using, and that we can use it for other things, not just alerting, not just for incident response, but we can use it for employee experience, right? So within PagerDuty, we're actually looking at ways to utilize it for the employee experience. So as an example, we built a pre-onboarding use case for it as well, where once we have an automation workflow that basically says, "Hey, hiring manager, your candidate is waiting for you on the Zoom." So it sends them a notification to say, "You should probably stop your reading and go meet with your candidate who's waiting for you on the Zoom call." And so we've kind of just built this network of really cool workflows so that we're able to work efficiently, and we're also giving really good customer service to our potential new hires. So we've built that. We've built notification for our Benevity, for example, for the number of volunteer hours, for our Newtonians, and then we're also working on offboarding. So we're really looking at the whole employee journey and what that looks like, and how and how we use our platform for it, and automating what we can.
That's awesome. And kudos to that, because I know PagerDuty is quite technical to set up a lot of these things. But I think also that's such a hot tip for audience members as they're rethinking how to really not only build in the mission and values of the company to onboarding or just entirety of employee experience lifecycle, but also like how do you build in just the value of your product so people understand what they're working on.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, with that said, I guess like how do you think about getting feedback from employees then in terms of for all these programs and events? Or just your approach to
Yeah.
new hire experience?
Yeah. So for employee experience, we have actually for the new hires specifically, I'll talk about that for now. We have I create a Slack channel that's specific to the cohort that I'm facilitating that month. So every month we have a Slack channel specific to that group, and that's where they can give me feedback. That's where I also push out information to them. So it's a dedicated space for them, and I opened that up for 3 months. We're also revamping a lot of our surveys, and we're also automating a lot of our surveys too. So we have a survey that we send out. We have pulse surveys, so it's the same kind of way. And the thing that I really like about PagerDuty is you can give feedback to leaders. So I know this might but I can right now send a Slack message to like our CFO, for example, Howard, and I can just say, hey, I just noticed this and would love, and give feedback. And it would be not taken as, actually it's a safe space, psychological safety. So they'll be like, oh, great. We should meet on this. I've given feedback to our CHRO and we've had meetings about it. And, it's always been met with okay, let's talk more about that. Would love to get your perspective and how can we move this along. Have you so it's a really good it's really good like that. So I think even before we think about the feedback, and actually our leader our leader who unfortunately passed away last year, her big mantra is feedback is a gift. And so, when you take a look and see, you think about that and say, okay, feedback is a gift. What does that mean, right? People want you to get better. And so I think it really starts even from the very beginning of building culture, building a culture of feedback. So, and what does that mean? And so that could mean building a culture of psychological, safety, where your employees are able to, one of our values, PagerDuty, is to bring yourself. And so bring yourself is you're able to do that, right? I'm able to go and talk to our leadership if there is something that I notice that maybe needs to be updated, or I ran with this PagerDuty use case, for example, this PagerDuty onboarding use case with automation workflows. And they said, yeah, go for it, try it out. And now we're launching it. So it's that kind of mentality.
Completely. The big thing I think hearing across the board from different organizations, culture is often top down. So really understanding how your leadership works and how to work with them is super crucial. And I'm just like, and one of the things that you mentioned about as well that I really liked was how you all are very focused on action and like demonstrating to the company that you all are hearing the survey feedback. Would you mind sharing with the audience here in terms of like how you do that and demonstrate to employees that you are really listening?
Yeah. Well, one, we could release a tool that listens. Epoch. Anyway, we just had our pulse survey, and our each department shows kind of that we have like 3 big action items. So with whatever we get from our surveys, we action on them. And I think, actioning on things that you find in surveys or your engagement surveys is always, at least what I found as I've worked through, in my consulting work, but also in other companies, is the action piece is always kind of one of the lowest scoring, because it's the question is around I believe that my feedback or whatever will be whatever, right? I think that's the wording. But at PagerDuty, it is a big deal. So we actually have what we call V2 moms that keep us on track in terms of the actions that we need to take. So V2 moms are similar to OKRs, right? Objectives and key results, and V2 moms are just a different way of looking at it. But a lot of the things that we find in our pulse surveys and our engagement surveys, that gets folded into our V2 moms, and then that's where we determine how to action it. But as an example, I think a big one right now that we're working through is decision making. I think a lot of companies are going through that, and just ensuring that we're really good with our decision making abilities. So
I love that. I think Salesforce also uses V2 Mom, so such a great model for
that's right,
approaching problems and measuring it.
Yeah, that's right. Salesforce does use V2 moms.
And with that, I know we have a few more minutes before we wrap up with final questions. Everyone that's listening in, if you all have questions for Tet, be sure to put it in the chat. We can address it or put it in the Q&A section, and we can get to them at the end. But just final questions for you, Tet. I know we kind of talked about this already throughout our conversation in terms of working with leadership and getting that leadership buy-in and the RTO approach of different organizations right now. So I guess for you, Tet, I know you have a lot of research and in your own personal studies too, in terms of providing that DEI lens when thinking about RTO or working with leadership. So could you share with the audience a little bit about your thinking behind this and observations you've been having?
Yeah, the RTO conversation is an interesting one, and it's also, like I said, it's still kind of spicy.
Yes.
And with RTO, I think it's important to see both sides, right? A lot of leaders want to invest. There's different types of investment. There's investment in the employees. They also want to make sure that their investment in the buildings that they bought are realized. There's investment in X, Y, and Z. And so, but I think the one thing, if I were to, and just from personally speaking, with RTO, that leaders need to be mindful of is around just taking a look at return to office with a more inclusive lens and inclusive perspective. And I think flexibility here is what's important. So as an example, you can take a look at some caregivers who might prefer working remotely because it's easier for them to to just drop off their kids or care for an ill parent or whatever from their home. And if something happens, there's no commute time, right? So there's all sorts of things to think through when we think about what leaders can do. I do think that it's probably even taking a look at roles too. What roles are necessary to be in an office? Are they necessary to be in an office versus what can be done remotely? And if things are working, I think during the pandemic, we've seen this work, right? We've seen that we can work remotely. We are able to accomplish things, at least from the one company that a previous company, we actually exceeded our revenue target during COVID, with everybody working remotely. So it's been proven that profitability doesn't necessarily mean butts and seats. It could also just mean, maybe building that culture. And how do you build that culture? And I think that's the challenge that a lot of employee engagement and employee experience leaders and practitioners have right now is how do you build that engagement and that connection so that you don't lose that? And so, like I said, some of the things that we're doing is looking at our hubs and leveraging our hubs and leveraging our offices for more of a collaboration space, right? Because you don't want that space to be wasted on desks. A lot of people really want to just collaborate. Also looking at tooling, right? What kind of tools can we use? So tools like Epoch, for example, that can really help build that engagement and build that connection. There's one tool that I would recommend to you, and I'll just put it on the chat, but it's called Pin, and they have a lot of tools for anybody who is a employee experience, employee engagement practitioner. So I love the work that they're doing. They're founded by some really awesome folks who used to, I think, work for Culture Amp and IDEO. I'm not IDEO, don't quote me on it. But if you look at their resources in their open library, it is amazing. So yeah, so there's just all of those things. And then also the one thing I will add is as regards to building culture and RTO is leveraging your ERGs. I think we forget that your ERGs are the communities who continue to elevate and amplify your inclusion, diversity, and equity programs. So leveraging them, and with this RTO conversation, having them have a seat at the table, because maybe some folks might not have a different perspective, especially with our community with who might have visible and invisible disabilities. They may prefer to just work remotely because that's where they feel most confident and more themselves. So that's, those are just things that I will share.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ted. And last two small questions for you. One thing that I know from our previous conversation that you think deeply about is like in terms of leadership buy-in and just like considering new strategies and tools and like the aspect of like storytelling and like evaluation of new tools and platforms. Like, can you share with the audience a little bit about how you approach all of this?
Yeah, and this is timely because I know we've been trying to pitch some new tools, but the way I've approached it is one, data, right? Data is powerful. So as an example, we just finished our Women's History Month programming. Could really have used a tool for people where they could register, they could and be more efficient, and also have reporting to show us what level of engagement we had for that, and we didn't have that tool. So the way I'm approaching it now is maybe I have a need, but other teams might have a need. So it might be that our event marketing team might need something similar, or our workplace experience team might need something similar. So it's just going outside of your circle and looking to see if other folks might have the same pain points, and then coming together as one team to say we would really love this tool because X, Y, and Z, and then building out the value proposition from there. And so it's really one of our values again, PagerDuty is run together. So it's running together with other groups and other teams to pitch that story.
Tet, last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. What are some resources that you turn to for employee engagement or for inspiration? I know you mentioned PIN. There's a few other ones that, probably are super relevant for folks.
Yeah, so for trends, I go to Qualtrics. Qualtrics is a really great report that they do around employee engagement and employee experience. I also go to Gallup. So with Gallup, actually, let me just share this with you. They just came out, this was in the 2022 Global Workplace, and they should be coming out with their 2023, but they have some really great ones here. And then, so a couple of things that we do here at PagerDuty is talk to other people about your experience or just meet them. So we have what we call casual collisions, and you can sign up for it, where it pairs you with somebody random from the company, and then it sets up a meeting then you set up a meeting and you just kind of meet with each other. And I've done it a couple of times, and it's been fun. I've met somebody from Chile. I've met somebody who works out of our Sydney office. And then I've met somebody who, I didn't realize was in the Bay Area. So, casual collision. So you could share, do something like that. And then I think lastly, the one thing that I'll share is that with this work that we do, because it is still service oriented, it's, we will get burnt out. I think burnt out is a key theme. Um, but finding those little moments in the day, right? So that's where I find my inspiration too, is just finding that little moment in the day where I might just pet my dog, or I'll make myself a cup of tea, or just making space for myself is one that I do. So I'll end there.
I love that, Ted. And to your point, it is in terms of just doing the work of employee programs, employee experience, we always see it as basically you all have customers, but it's just all the employees internally who sometimes are even louder than external customers. But with that said, Ted, in terms of parting thoughts, do you have any final things that you would want to leave with the audience before we wrap up?
Well, this is I'm just excited to be here. And also, if you want to connect with me to talk more about the automation work that we're doing at PagerDuty, please let me know. Hit me up on LinkedIn, and I can set up a meeting for us to connect, and can show you kind of what that looks like, and maybe even potentially demo what that is. And yeah, I mean, this work that we do is important. So we just need to keep going.
Thank you so much, Tet. And with that wraps up our webinar series for today. Again, thank you so much all for joining us. As Tet mentioned, she's open to reaching out at Epoch as well. We'll be sure to share all our learnings from today, and also set up maybe a roundtable for us to talk more about Tet's automation, because I think that is highly needed. And to your point, that efficiency is topical. But with that said, everyone, thank you again for joining us. If you ever want to chat more about things that we discussed here today, or anything about employee experience and programs, feel free to reach out to myself or my team. And if yourself or you know someone that think we should highlight in one of these webinar series, please let me know. We're always looking for more experts and leaders like Tet to share learnings with you all.